There is a small detail on cheese packages that most shoppers never stop to read. It isn't the giant word cheese on the front, it's the exact product name underneath it. Because in the American cheese aisle, there is a major difference between natural cheese, processed cheese, cheese food, cheese products, and imitation cheese. And companies don't necessarily have to make that distinction obvious from across the aisle. So I went through popular cheese products, compared ingredient lists, looked at how these products are classified, and checked the federal standards that govern cheese and related cheese products. What I found is not that every processed cheese is fake. It's more interesting than that. Some products are exactly what you would expect. Others are heavily formulated products that happen to look like the cheese you thought you were buying. And 3 brands stand out for doing something much simpler. Real dairy ingredients, straightforward labels, and a product that doesn't need a long explanation to tell you what it is. So before you grab your next package of cheese, here are 10 brands and products that deserve a much closer look, and 3 that are worth reaching for instead. One rule will make the entire list easier to understand. The FDA maintains standards of identity for cheeses and related cheese products. Those standards can specify what a product must contain, what ingredients are permitted, and how it can be made. That means the word processed doesn't automatically mean bad. It means different. And once you understand that difference, the cheese aisle starts looking very different. Number 10, Kraft Singles. Kraft Singles are probably one of the most recognizable cheese products in America. They melt perfectly, they stack neatly, they come individually wrapped, and they're incredibly convenient. But convenience is exactly what you're paying for here. Kraft Singles are not simply slices cut from a block of cheddar. They're a processed cheese product formulated to deliver a very specific texture and melting behavior. That means ingredients beyond what you would normally expect from a traditional block of cheese. The important distinction isn't that the product is somehow illegal or secretly fake. It's that when you say cheese, many shoppers picture milk, cultures, salt, and thyme. Kraft Singles are engineered for consistency. Every slice needs to behave almost exactly the same way. That's useful for a grilled cheese sandwich. But it's very different from buying a traditional piece of cheddar, and that difference becomes more important as we move down the list. Number 9, Velveeta. Velveeta has built its entire identity around one thing: meltability. It doesn't crumble. It doesn't separate the way many natural cheeses can. It turns into an incredibly smooth sauce. And that is not an accident. Velveeta is a processed cheese product designed around that texture. The formulation uses dairy ingredients alongside emulsifying ingredients that help keep the fat and water together when the cheese is heated. That is why Velveeta behaves differently from a normal block of cheddar. Again, there is nothing inherently deceptive about that. The package tells you what it is. The problem is consumer perception. If you're looking for traditional cheese, this isn't the same thing. If you're looking for an ultra-smooth melting product, that's exactly why Velveeta exists, and that distinction is going to matter even more with the next brand. Number 8, Cheese Whiz. Cheese Whiz takes the processed cheese concept one step further. Instead of selling you a solid block or slice, it gives you cheese in a spreadable form. That convenience requires formulation. The product needs to remain smooth, stable, and spreadable, instead of separating into oil and solids. So when you look at Cheese Whiz, the ingredient list tells you immediately that you're not dealing with a traditional wheel or block of cheese. You're dealing with a highly processed cheese product. And that's not necessarily the problem. The problem is when consumers assume that every product in the cheese section represents the same kind of food. It doesn't. Aged cheddar, mozzarella, processed slices, and cheese spreads can all sit within the same broad grocery category while being completely different products. And the next one is a perfect example. Number 7, Kraft Mac and Cheese cheese sauce. This is where things get interesting. Most people aren't buying boxed macaroni and cheese expecting an artisan cheddar. They're buying convenience. But the cheese sauce in these products is formulated for shelf stability, consistency, and easy preparation. The ingredients are designed to turn into a smooth sauce when combined with water or milk. That means the product has a very different formulation from simply shredding a block of cheddar over pasta. And that's an important lesson for the entire category. Don't judge a product only by the giant picture on the front. Look at the ingredient statement, look at the product identity, and ask yourself what you're actually buying. Because sometimes the biggest difference isn't between one brand and another. It's between one category of cheese and another. Number 6. American cheese from store brands. Store brand American slices can be incredibly inexpensive, and that price is part of the appeal. But like national brands, many of these products are formulated specifically for consistency and melting performance. Some are labeled processed cheese or processed cheese product rather than simply cheddar or American cheese. That wording matters. The FDA has specific standards for different cheese and related cheese products, and those categories exist precisely because these foods aren't all formulated the same way. So here's the practical takeaway. If you want a slice that melts perfectly onto a burger, processed cheese may actually be exactly what you're looking for. But if you're trying to buy a traditional cheese with a short ingredient list, don't assume the word cheese on the package tells you everything. It doesn't. Number 5. Individually wrapped cheddar-style slices. This is where packaging can become misleading without actually being illegal. A package can look exactly like traditional cheddar. The color can look identical. The slices can even taste remarkably similar. But the legal product identity and ingredient list may tell a different story. Some sliced products use additional ingredients to control moisture, texture, shelf life, and melting. Again, that doesn't automatically make them unsafe. It makes them more processed. And that's the distinction this entire investigation comes down to. We're not looking for ingredients to demonize. We're looking at what manufacturers are doing to turn dairy ingredients into a standardized grocery product. We're halfway through the list. And if you've ever stood in front of the cheese section wondering why one package costs twice as much as another, the next few entries explain a lot of that difference. Number 4. Pre-shredded cheese. This one surprises people, because the cheese inside the bag can absolutely be real cheese. The difference is what happens after it's shredded. Manufacturers need those individual pieces to stay separate inside the package. Otherwise, you open the bag and find one giant block. So some shredded cheeses use anti-caking ingredients such as cellulose or starches. That doesn't make the cheese fake. It simply means you're buying cheese that has been processed for convenience. And here's where the consumer decision becomes simple. If you want convenience, pre-shredded cheese is useful. If you want the simplest possible ingredient list, buy a block and shred it yourself. One extra step can remove several functional ingredients from the equation. Number 3, cheese products marketed around flavor rather than cheese type. This category deserves attention because the flavor name can sometimes become more prominent than the actual product identity. Nacho, cheddar style, cheese flavored, creamy cheese. These descriptions can sound almost interchangeable when you're shopping quickly. They aren't. The closer you get to products designed primarily around flavor, shelf life, spreadability, or convenience, the more important it becomes to read the actual statement of identity and ingredient list. That's where you find out whether you're buying a traditional cheese or a more heavily formulated cheese product. And now, we're down to the 2 products that show why the label matters. Number 2, imitation cheese and dairy-free cheese alternatives. This one is actually the easiest category to understand. If a product uses plant ingredients instead of dairy, it shouldn't be treated as traditional cheese. And that's okay. There are legitimate reasons people buy dairy-free alternatives. The important thing is transparency. You should know whether the product is made from milk or from something like nuts, soy, coconut, or another plant source. The FDA has specifically addressed labeling of plant-based alternatives, emphasizing that consumers should be able to distinguish similar products and identify the plant source. So the issue isn't that an alternative exists. The issue is whether you understand what you're buying. And that brings us to number 1. Number 1, the cheese that looks traditional but has the most complicated formulation. This is where I would pay the closest attention to the exact product label rather than simply trusting the brand name. If the package says cheese, check the specific identity. If it says processed cheese, understand what that means. If it says cheese product, read the ingredients. And if it is an imitation or plant-based alternative, make sure that's what you actually want. The biggest mistake shoppers make isn't buying processed cheese. It's assuming that every product carrying a cheese-related name is essentially the same thing. It isn't. Now, let's flip the list, because this isn't about telling you that the entire cheese aisle is bad. There are still brands making straightforward, traditional cheese products. Best option number 3, Tillamook. Tillamook is one of the strongest mainstream choices when you want traditional dairy cheese without an unnecessarily complicated ingredient list. Its cheddar products are recognizable for what they are: milk, cultures, salt, enzymes, and thyme. The company is also farmer-owned through its cooperative structure, which gives it a different relationship with its dairy supply than many conventional food companies. It's not the cheapest cheese in the store, but you're paying for a product that actually resembles what most people imagine when they hear the word cheddar. Best option number 2, Cabot. Cabot is another strong choice for traditional cheese. The company is a farmer-owned cooperative, and many of its cheeses have straightforward ingredient lists. Their cheddar lineup gives you something very different from highly formulated processed cheese. You get actual cheese with the characteristics that come from aging, milk composition, cultures, and time. And because Cabot is widely available, you don't have to visit a specialty cheese shop to find it. But there is one brand I would put at number 1. Best option number 1, Sargento. Sargento stands out because it occupies an interesting middle ground. It offers the convenience of packaged cheese while still selling a large range of traditional natural cheeses. And that distinction matters. You can buy shredded cheese when you need convenience. You can buy slices. You can buy blocks. But many of those products are still clearly identified as natural cheeses rather than being engineered primarily as processed cheese products. So what's the biggest lesson from this entire investigation? Don't memorize 10 brands. Don't memorize 3 brands. Memorize the label. The next time you're standing in front of the cheese case, turn the package around. First, look at the exact product name. Is it natural cheese, processed cheese, cheese food, cheese product, or an imitation or plant-based alternative? Then, look at the ingredient list. If you see milk, cultures, salt, and enzymes, you're looking at a very different formulation from a product built around multiple functional ingredients. That doesn't mean every extra ingredient is dangerous. It means you should understand why it's there. And finally, look at the price. A cheap processed slice and an aged block of cheddar aren't necessarily competing on the same thing. One is selling convenience and consistency. The other is selling traditional cheese. At the beginning of this investigation, I told you there was a small detail hiding in plain sight. It's the product identity. Once you start reading those words instead of just looking at the picture on the front, the cheese aisle becomes much easier to understand. You don't have to be a food scientist. You don't have to memorize every brand. You just need to know what you're actually buying. Because sometimes the biggest difference between 2 packages isn't the brand. It's what the package legally says the product is. And now you know where to look. If this changed the way you shop for cheese, share this with someone who still chooses their cheese entirely from the front of the package.